Welcome to Destiny Church. We are ordinary people moving towards Jesus and becoming disciples who are courageous influencers of society. You're about to watch a short extract from The Lounge, which is a conversation that we have every Tuesday from 7:30 till 8:30 live on Zoom. We would love you to be part of that live environment sometime. And we just believe that people are best in community. And so we believe in conversations and discussions that move our lives towards Jesus and that are life-giving. So the Zoom ID is coming up on the screen. We would love to have you there. If it's your first time with us, let me encourage you to follow us on our social media handles so that you can be part of receiving great new content. And please like and subscribe and set notifications on this YouTube channel so that you don't miss out on exclusive content. If you're part of the family, why don't you take a minute to share this content and that may be really helpful to someone. And just a particular message to you as we're talking about grief and loss, whatever that looks like for you. If you'd like to talk to someone, you can reach out to us using the WhatsApp number 060-644-0857. Someone from our pastoral team will gladly be in contact with you. Enjoy the content, and remember, Jesus loves you and he has a plan for your life. God is more than enough for you during this time. Well, welcome to you once again. If you've just joined us recently, you can participate in the chat by using the raise your hand function, typing a question or a comment in the comments section, or simply waving like crazy. And if anybody notices me missing someone, please just let me know on the chat that someone's waving and wants to jump in the conversation. We're talking about grief and about loss. And I want to begin by saying I think that has many different layers to it. We tend to instantly think of grief in terms of someone passed away, and that is the most obvious way that someone can be grieving. If that is your story tonight, this will definitely, hopefully instantly show you some stuff that might be happening in your world. But I want to speak to people, to others who may not be in that state. There's a lot of different ways in which grief and loss come into our lives. If someone is ill, you're experiencing real grief and real loss, especially if it's COVID, with all of the anxiety around what it might mean for someone to be ill. And even the anticipation of waiting for a test result to come back on a COVID test can be incredibly distressing. You may find some of these stages of grief being very real for you, although you haven't found someone actually passed away in your world. And I think in many ways, other ways we experience loss. You experience the loss of if you have a divorce, you're experiencing the loss of a marriage. If you have a breakup, you're experiencing the loss of a relationship. If you've lost your job, you're experiencing a whole loss of identity and meaning and purpose in that area of your life, the friendships, perhaps over years. And in a broader sense, I have noticed that I have been experiencing pretty much all the stages of grief in my own life, just with regards to COVID. I think that in a sense, we are all grieving over the loss of the world that we used to know. The world will never be the same, and we've lost some sense of normal. So I hope that these stages, you can apply them broadly to your life, and just I hope that they'll be helpful to you. So I'm talking about the 5 and now 6 stages of grief. It is research originally from 1979 by a person called Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. And she did some groundbreaking research. I've just posted the book that I'm reading in the chat. And in 1979, she said, can we find out what's actually happening inside a person when they're experiencing grief or loss or anticipating grief or loss? And she came up with these 5 stages, and then her protege, David Kessler, then spoke about the 6th stage, which is meaning. So the 5 stages, here we go. Number 1, denial. Number 2, anger. Then bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. And the 6th stage is meaning. So again, if you, in case, just to give you a handle, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and meaning. Let me just post that in the chat quickly, and that'll just maybe be the only note that would help you to remember tonight's content. Let's jump into the content. And the first thing that I think is important to remember about these stages of grief is that it's definitely unhelpful to think of them in terms of a linear process. So if I'm traveling from here to Cape Town, I know I'm going to pass through Port Elizabeth, I'm going to pass through Jeffreys Bay, I'm going to pass through George, I'm going to pass through Knysna, I'm going to pass through Worcestershire maybe, and then I'm going to end up in Cape Town. And what the research says is that grief is not like that at all. You cannot lay out this neat plan of grief recovery and development where you move from denial to anger to bargaining, all the way through to acceptance, through the subtypes. You can't control it. In fact, our need to control it is the biggest lesson that we need to learn, is that this is something that is not something, grief is not something that you can control. It's much more like spaghetti. Don't think of it like a road where you get to the destination and then you're over it and you move on. No, it's not like that at all. It's like spaghetti. Grief, anger, acceptance, depression, bargaining, mix in. And you may go through it several times in one day, several times in 1 week, several times in a year. Some of these things may come back to you more than a year afterwards. But the good news is that if we'll embrace that and invite Jesus into that space bravely, that we will find healing, we will recover joy, we will more than survive this, but God will in fact use these processes if we will partner with him in ways that are redemptive and ways that actually build a whole new meaning in our lives. And so right away, let me just say that I'm not a person who, my theology is everything happens for a reason. People say that at funerals, this person was murdered. Well, everything happens for a reason. I think the reason is often really simply that the devil is real. He wants to destroy life. Sin has broken the world. We are broken inside us. If things are broken all around us, things are even broken in our natural environment. And that sometimes is simply the reason. There doesn't have to be some grand reason for someone to die. There doesn't have to be a grand reason for someone to lose their job. Sometimes it's just simply, this is bad news. This is the devil's work. It's a tragedy. Let's leave it at that. And so when I talk about meaning and I talk about hope, I'm not saying that suddenly you're going to have this incredible epiphany about why God did this. And you know, that's assuming that God did it in the first place, because I believe my Jesus is good. He does not cause evil things to happen in the world. He does allow them within his perfect will. But if you just, let me just debunk this myth straight away. I really think it's very important for us to wrestle with this thought and to help people who are grieving that you don't have to have a tidy explanation for the bad thing that is happening in order to be a Christian and a person of faith. You can simply say, our world is broken. Bad things happen to good people, and God is still good. And I'm going to enter into this process of grief, not so that I'll come out of it with a neat and tidy explanation at the end, and I'll understand everything that happened. But I'll go into this trusting Jesus with all of my questions, with all of my unmanageable emotions. I just hope that introduction is helpful to you. So again, just to say, when we talk about the 5 stages, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is more like geography. This is like, there's this mountain of anger over here, there's denial over here, there's bargaining over here, there's acceptance over there. And as you journey through grief, you may pass by these different mountains, these different buildings, many different ways at many different times. It's just to give you a familiarity so that you know that you're not crazy when you're feeling these things. Other people are going through them as well. Other people have survived them. as well. And if you can start to see yourself in some of these places, you will make progress also. Okay, let's talk about denial. Why? The easiest way to talk about this is if someone has passed away. Denial would look like someone saying, they're not dead, they're just on a work trip. I know. My husband goes on work trips a lot, and he said he's normally back within a couple of days, and he's just taking long to pick up the phone. And you may be dealing with someone like that. You may have had feelings like that, and then you start to say, well, this person is crazy, they're losing their mind. No, they're not. This is just simply the way that our brains are wired, so that we don't take in more than we can handle. When you experience a deep level of grief or loss in your life, your body, your brain is designed to resist thoughts that are totally overwhelming. And certainly if your life partner dies, or there's some life-changing event and illness comes upon you, the instant natural response is going to be, this is not happening. It's not happening to me. It's not true. There must be another explanation for it. Your faith may give expression to itself in ways like that, like, no. God's told me it's okay. It's not happening. It's not happening to me. And this is really just a natural, very, very natural response, so that your brain and your soul can cope with one thing at a time. And so the reason that you can't believe initially that this thing is happening is that you physically can't believe that it's happening. You can't take it in. And so during this stage, you would find people maybe telling their story over and over and over to yourself. If you've experienced any kind of grief or loss, you would go over the story over and over again. It keeps coming back. Let me repeat the details. Let me go through every detail of it. I was sitting there. Then this person said this. Then I got a phone call. Then it was 4 o'clock. Then this person happened. And you can't escape it. And this event, unescapably, is churning over and over in your mind in ways that you're not really in control of. And this is just your psyche, your soul, just starting to come to terms with the trauma and going over the same storyline, like playing a movie over and over again. Your brain is playing the movie several times over so that it doesn't miss any of the details, and actually starts to say, this is what really happened. So as much as this feels totally out of control, a person may seem out of control. They may say things that make them sound very, very strange or out of control. It's actually very, very normal. And the beautiful thing is that in this point of denial, as you're doing it's what's happening is the healing process is beginning, because you're starting to accept the reality of the loss. Not that you're okay with it, just that it actually happened. What happened happened. It wasn't a dream. It's very real. I have to start to confront it. This is an important first stage. And again, if I'm talking to you about somebody who this is not your story, but you're trying to help someone who's in grief, you need to be very careful about not giving advice, not judging them, not asking them to feel any differently. It would be terribly hurtful to say, oh, no, it is true. Just stop kidding yourself. It is true. The fact is their brain psychologically cannot contain the fact that it is true yet. And so give people time, because remember that in all of these stages, healing can visit a person. And I believe God can uniquely visit a person in each of these stages. So stage number 1, denial. Stage number 2, anger. And anger does not have to be logical in order to be valid. This is very important. Let me say that again. Anger does not have to be logical in order to be valid. If you've experienced loss, you may have found yourself becoming angry at things and with things that have nothing to do with the event. And that's very, very normal. In fact, during this stage, there may be anger in many different ways. You could be angry it's very easy and very normal to find people to blame. Well, you know, why did that person take the trip? They wouldn't have had the car accident if they didn't take the trip. Normal response. Why didn't the doctors do more to save that person's life? Then maybe all you can find eventually is, why do I have to still be in the world when this person is not in the world anymore? Why do I have to live with this? Why have I survived? I'm angry that I've survived and that person has died. That sort of thing. And again, it's very important to understand that this is a normal phase. Don't judge yourself. Don't be harsh on yourself. If you have very dark thoughts, that stuff is normal. The scriptures, you got to read the Psalms to see how dark David's thoughts get. David says stuff like, the wicked break their teeth in their mouths, Lord. Let their children be fatherless. This is the beginning of some of his Psalms. Let those guys that have done that to me, may they die and may their children grow up without their parents. David writes that, okay? And then at the end of the Psalm, he's like, well, sorry, God, that's not really what I want. But I needed to say that. I needed to go through that. So this stuff doesn't mean you're unspiritual, and it just means you're normal, you're human. It means that you're made in the image of God, and sometimes anger, although it's not the most important emotion to go through at this time, it's the one that presents itself first. And the good news about anger is that if you're allowing yourself to feel anger, it means you're allowing yourself to feel something. You're not in denial anymore, and hopefully, with time, that anger is going to give way to some of the more important emotions that you need to get to deal with. Some of them that are a bit more painful: sadness, panic, hurt, loneliness. So anger sometimes is just like, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in me. I don't really know what's going on in me. I don't understand. I don't know how to process it. I don't know what prayers to pray. I don't know what and let me just be angry at something. If you've ever kicked a door, you understand what it's like to just want to express anger at something because you just simply want to feel something. That's what it is. I just want to feel something. And again, that's very normal. And hopefully, if you can see yourself in that space or help someone else see themselves in that space, that this is okay, it's going to move you on to more redemptive kind of emotional expressions. So, and I think, let me just talk about motivation for a moment, because there's what I call an exchange narrative. A psychologist will use other terms, but I'm just talking it in terms of like a biblical framework. An exchange narrative is, I do good things in my life and I get good things in return. And good people in the world do good things and they get good things in return. And that's unfortunately not what life is like. Often, bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. And when you experience loss, trauma, someone does something very wrong to you, you've got to expect that your heart, your flesh, what the Bible calls your flesh, the part of you, not your physical body, but the part of you that wants to make yourself right by doing good and make yourself right and prove yourself to God. That's what the scripture, that's what Paul anyway talks about in terms of the flesh. That is going to be screaming, but I'm a good person. Why did something bad happen to me? But that person's a good person. Why did something bad happen to them? I want to encourage you, if that is the place that you find yourself in, I want to encourage you to go and read Psalm 73. And it really is a beautiful, just poetic journey through anger, judgment, blame, guilt. And the middle of the Psalm, it's Asaph who writes it. He says, I've kept my hands clean in vain. In vain I have served you all day long. It's been for nothing, God. I've served you for nothing. Have you ever felt like that? When you experience a depth of grief, you can say, I've done good things for nothing. I've served God for nothing. It isn't worth it. And then few verses later, he says, if I'd spoken like this, I would have betrayed your people. In other words, I've come back to myself and I've seen myself in the mirror and said, that wasn't a good perspective on how things really are. And at the end, he ends up thanking God for his goodness. So again, I'm just trying to talk to you, especially if you've grown up in you may have grown up in an environment where faith, if you are a Christ follower, I'm not assuming that you are. If you're not a Christ follower and you're on this chat, I just hope that you'll find this helpful and all of this works. I just believe that faith in Christ is the way that really helps you to deal with grief and loss. But where was I? Got lost. Help me, Jesus. Oh yeah. If you've grown up in a faith environment where you may have been told to have faith is never to have anger or doubt. It's never to feel out of control. It's never to have unmanageable emotions. That's not faith. I think that is a very simplistic view of faith. I think of the moments in Matthew 17 when the disciples come down from the mountain of transfiguration and they find this dad. He's a distressed dad. His little boy has lost his mind. He's running around. He's throwing himself in the fire. He's throwing himself in the water, trying to drown himself. And the assessment is there's demons here. And the disciples couldn't drive it out. And Jesus says to this man, he says, the man says to him, if you can do it for me, please. And Jesus says, of course I can do it. And the man, and anything is possible for him who believes, right? This is what Christians want to put on every card for grief. Anything is possible if you have the Lord and you have hope. And that's the front page of the Christian grief card. Anything is possible for him who believes. Just have faith, just hope. God is still good, okay? And the man's response is so beautiful. He says, I do believe. Help me to overcome my unbelief. He's saying, Jesus, I get it. You're God, but I'm struggling. I'm a mixture. I'm a mixture of belief and unbelief. I'm a mixture of hope and fear. I'm a mixture of anger and rage and guilt and forgiveness. I'm a mixture. God, help me with my mixture. If you're a mixture, it doesn't mean that you don't have faith. In fact, it may be one of the best places for you to develop faith. And just so again, if you're a Christian, I just want to, and you maybe grew up in an environment where faith looks one size and one shape, I just want to drive this one home, and then we'll move on from the scripture tonight. Ephesians 4:12, in your anger, do not sin. It doesn't say don't be angry. It doesn't say anger is a sin. It says in your anger, don't sin. So in other words, bring your anger to God. God's not scared of it. God can take care of himself. And if you find yourself shaking your fist at God, shouting at God, being angry with God, why did you let this happen? That can be one of the most important expressions of faith that you can have if you're suffering grief. It doesn't mean you've betrayed God. It doesn't mean you've lost your faith. It just means you're normal. And in fact, the scripture, when it talks about grief, uses a very particular word, and this word is lament. We have a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations. And to lament is different just to grieve or to mourn. To lament is to bring your grief to God, to give expression to your grief in a way that has faith. God calls us to lament in his presence. It doesn't mean that he gives us instant answers. It doesn't mean that we come to him with well-constructed thoughts. We just bring all of us into his presence. So the concept of lament may be something that you want to read about in the Bible. Okay. So okay, just to review here, we talked about denial. We're speaking about anger, very, very, very normal. Again, if we ask people to move past their anger too fast, we're just alienating them. It is so unhelpful to say to someone who's grieving, who's angry. I was talking to someone the other day on the phone. So in my family, in my sort of extended family, 2 people have died of COVID in the last 6 weeks. And I was talking to someone on the phone, and for the better part of 45 minutes, they were just crying, asking questions, shouting, swearing. And it would have been so easy. It wasn't pleasant for me to listen to that. But it would be so easy for me to say, you're just not being godly right now. Stop it. But actually, that person just needed to do that for a bit. They needed to do it. And the next day I got a nice message saying, I'm so sorry. I just needed a safe place. I just needed a safe place to vomit all of that. And I'm glad that I could trust you with that. And I said, I'm so glad you trusted me with that. Do you feel better? And she said, yeah. And God's speaking to me. So, it's very important not to judge people in their anger. But just to say, okay, God's not scared of this. I'm not scared of this. I love you. God loves you. I'm with you in this. Okay. So starting with just accepting people with where they are. Isn't this the message of grace? I'm going to accept you where you are. God accepts us where we are. And when he finds us in that place, he brings us forward. He helps us on a journey. Okay. So again, here's the thing. Here's a good thing about anger. You're feeling something. You're allowing yourself to feel something. And so it's important not to bottle it up. Journal. Very important. If you don't have someone to talk to, journal. Write it down. Write it out multiple times. I was helping a friend of mine some time ago who lost her dad in a terrible way. And she wrote letters to him. And she wrote letters to the guy who was drunk, who killed him in an accident. And she wrote all of these letters, and they never got sent to anyone. But it helped her, and it helped her to connect with Jesus. Go for a walk. Find ways to explore that. And here's the thing, maybe this will just help you. If you can see your anger not as a sin, but your anger as an expression of the intensity of your love for that person, or your intensity of your love for that thing, then maybe it'll give you permission to enter into that space in a way that is redemptive. And one last thing about anger before we move on. Remember that anger can also turn away from other people, and it can turn towards yourself. And that's called guilt. And you can punish yourself in 1,000 different ways. Why didn't I do this? What if I did that? I should have said this to them. I should have tried harder. And that's a very, very destructive thing to do with your anger. But again, feeling those things, you've got to go through that in order to make progress. And again, to write those thoughts down, not to resist them, but to say, God, help me to check this against reality. And the only way I can check these things against reality is by saying, this is what I think. This is what I feel. This is the reality of it. God, give me your perspective on it. And you may want to write something and come back to it the next day. Okay, so denial, anger, bargaining. Bargaining is when you start to say, what if, or if only. What if only. What if you hadn't gone out that night? What if I never fell in love with that person? What if I tried harder? If only this, if only that. And you may find even, if you're struggling with anticipating grief, maybe someone's sick, you may find yourself bargaining and saying, God, I'll do this. If you heal that person, I'll try, and so again, this can make you feel very guilty or very angry as you go through all of these what if scenarios. The other thing that happens during this bargaining stage sometimes is you're replaying every scenario. I don't know if you've ever watched one of those movies where they have alternate endings. There used to be this function on DVDs. Did I just say DVDs? I'm showing you how old I am. No, who watches DVDs anymore? On DVD movies, you used to have sometimes alternative endings, and you could just push a button and, okay, this guy gets on the train, and then that happens. And then in the alternative ending, he doesn't get on the train, and then that happens. And bargaining can often be about alternate endings. What if, no, then that. And remember that you're not going crazy again. These are just ways that your soul is trying to cope with coming to terms with the reality that this really happened, and that there was nothing that you could have done or anyone else could have done to change it now. You can't change it now. You might have been able to do something then, but you actually can't change it now. It has happened. You can't change the ending. You can't solve it. And you remember that your brain and your soul are always trying to take back control over your life. So bargaining sometimes looks like working. Sometimes your response to grief or trauma or anxiety is, I'm just going to work really hard at something else because this is me taking back control of my life. You may even do that to distract yourself. And all of this, again, is very normal. And what it means is that you're starting to come to terms with the fact that this is a reality. And as you do that, you're not denying it anymore. You've been angry or guilty or both, and you've done with all of your bargaining, and you start to enter in this phase where you realize that it just hits you. This is real. You may enter what's called a state of depression. And where you've been talking about the past, now all you can think about is the present. This person is not here. I don't have my job anymore. This has happened. I am sick. I am divorced, whatever it is. And the depth of emotion that you've been not able to feel in the past is going to start to come up. This can mean you even feel tiredness in your physical body. You feel no motivation. I remember when one of my closest friends committed suicide, the clearest memory I have was making myself a cup of tea and then I just fell over and lay on the floor for 30 minutes. And I didn't want to shower. And just the sense of I need to be with it enough to make a cup of tea was overwhelming for me. I couldn't make a cup of tea. And so again, this is it's just normal, and it's your body's way of protecting you by shutting down your nervous system so that you can adapt to something that you can't handle right now. And it will pass. It will pass. It will pass. If you have depression for months or years, you may need to talk to someone. You may even need a medical intervention. And again, I just want to encourage you, if you are someone who grew up with sort of a one-dimensional faith background, and I mean that I don't mean any disrespect, it's just, a crude way to describe it, but if you may have been taught that to have mental challenges is like it's a lack of faith, or it's demons, or it's a curse, or you're just letting the devil in your head. And here's my perspective on it. If my leg is sick, I take painkillers. If my kidney is sick, I take medication for that. And if my brain is sick, I can take medication for that as well. It's not a lack of faith. It may actually give me the space in terms of controlling myself where I can actually give expression to my faith. So again, that should not be seen as a lack of faith, maybe an important part of the journey. If you've been in a state of depression for a long time, you may need to consider seeing someone. And so here's the thing about depression. Again, the beautiful thing about it, the part that brings healing, is that now it's like you're accepting that the room is empty, and you can start to bring other things into it. You're starting to fill it. I don't mean that the person that you've lost is not with you, that you've moved on. I think that's a very unhelpful way to think about this. You never move on, you actually just move forward. And let me just go there for a minute, because I think that there is a societal response that says depression is something that shouldn't happen. It's a sickness. So we don't want it. We stamp it out. Just cheer up. We say to people who are feeling depressed, just cheer up. Just put a smile on your face. Just have faith. Just trust God. And we try to get the emotions back. And instead of letting it actually do its work. And so what we say to people's grief can be very cruel sometimes in that we say, just move on, when in fact you never actually move on. You only ever move forward. And so that brings us into what we talk about in terms of acceptance. And let me just end with this. I've been talking for about 40 minutes now. And so let me just end with this quickly. as we talk about the stage of acceptance, we're definitely not saying that you're okay with what's happened. And you have this, as I said at the beginning, you suddenly have this epiphany, oh, this is what God was doing, or this is what it all means, or I had a car accident so that I could have a great testimony, or, I was raped as a child so that I could become an activist. You don't have, that's not what it means in terms of acceptance and meaning. It just means that you start to get a sense of living with this reality, and that this is your reality, and the grief and the pain that you feel, it's now part of you. It's not something you've passed through and you've cut off and you've finished with it. It's part of you, and God is with you in it, and He is busy redeeming it. It's part of your whole. It's part of you now, and it's okay. And there's a whole new level of meaning. So maybe this will help. I had some dear friends in Cape Town, and their son passed away in a car accident when he was, I think, 23 years old. And it was so strange to me the first couple of times I met them. I was just learning about their family, and they said, no, we have two sons. One's in heaven, and one's here, and he lives in Plumstead. And I just thought this the weirdest. I thought they were so weird. Like, you don't have two sons. One of them's passed away. You don't have two sons. You have one son. But what they were saying, I'd started to learn, was very wise and mature. They were saying, this person will always be part of our lives, and he was a gift to us while he's alive. And so we carry with us, we still carry him with us, his meaning, his life, the way he's impacted our lives, and we still celebrate him in every way. It's not something that we deny, we shut off, we don't think about. He's always with us, and it's just now that this thing is not like an open wound anymore. Now it's like a scar. Now it's a picture of God's healing. So when we talk about the stage of acceptance, you're starting to live in a world where you're constructing new meaning, and you are moving forward. And again, as we just create some room for discussion at this point, and I draw just a couple of conclusions. This process, if you missed my introduction, you must understand that the most important thing you got to learn from the 5 stages or 6 stages of grief, it's been expanded to denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, meaning, is it's not this linear process. You can't control it. You can't say, I'm going to do this, and it's going to go there, and then that's going to happen, and that's going to happen. It's the spaghetti. It's the spaghetti. And the more you understand it as just something that's going to move and shift around within you, the more you're going to be able to make progress, because you're not going to say, I'm not making progress. A person who's grieving can get more grief by saying, I'm supposed to be here by now. It's been 6 months, and your friends are saying, well, can you just move on? Can you not be so angry anymore? And say, well, I don't know how to do that. I wasn't angry a week ago, and now I'm angry again. Am I not making progress? No, you're just human, and this thing is not linear. It's actually this mix, and Jesus is in the mix with you, and he loves you, and he will visit you in every one of those places. And so in conclusion, just remember that phrase from Matthew chapter 17. I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. I'm a mixture, and I might be a mixture for a long time, and that's okay. And in a sense, I may never be unmixed in these things until I get to eternity. I may never get a sense of complete victory over this, because I'm living in a world that is marked by sin and death. But I am definitely going to move forward. I'm definitely going to experience victory. I'm definitely going to experience healing. I'm definitely going to experience progress. And I'm definitely going to be visited by the grace of God in a way that gives me a whole new world in which this grief has come with me. It's just taken a different shape. And so all of these stages, especially if you think about depression, it's not going to stay with you. It's like a visitor that comes to your house, serves a purpose, and then leaves. Anger comes to your house, serves a purpose, and then leaves. Denial comes to your house, serves a purpose, and then leaves. And eventually, you're going to have a whole new house. And by the grace of God, you will be helped and healed and making progress.
Well, we hope you found that conversation helpful and encouraging. And if you didn't get to be part of the live conversation, one of the practical takeaways we spoke about at the end is so important. And that is just simply to use these 6 steps as a framework for understanding what's happening inside of you. Just being able to identify and name some of the feelings, some of the emotions that you might be feeling can be the most practical way just to have a reading of yourself and to give yourself grace and space to be in that place. Why don't you take a minute now at the end of this content and spend some time journaling? Write down what you're feeling and why, and be okay with just expressing yourself that way. That may be a very practical way for you to make progress. God loves you and He has a plan for your life. And again, if you'd like to talk to somebody from the church, you can WhatsApp us on 060-644-0857. And you can follow us on social media so that you don't miss out on this great content. And so the handle's coming up on the screen. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook. If you want to listen by audio, you can follow us on SoundCloud. And of course, here on our YouTube channel, remember to subscribe and set notifications so that you don't miss out on exclusive content. If you're a regular person with us, we'd love you to share this using your social media platforms so that we can be a life-giving church to the people around us. And once again, if you've never joined us in the lounge, we would love to see you on a Tuesday night. It's open to everybody. The Zoom ID is coming up on the screen, 7:30 till 8:30 on Zoom, and that Zoom ID remains the same every Tuesday. God bless you. Have a great week.